Hey everyone, it's Denise Brown. Thanks so much for being with me today. We're going to talk about your caregiving impact. I think of this as a two-part workshop. We're going to focus on what's the impact you want to make, and then how do you want to actually create it? What's the form? Then I'll tell you a little bit about our training programs to see if those align with your goals. Okay, so thanks to everybody who's joined live. This is interactive, so feel free to post in the chat room. And for those of you who are watching the archive, thanks for watching the archive. Okay, so a little bit about me. I started supporting family caregivers in 1990. And then I launched one of the very first online caregiving communities in 1996, which I managed for 24 years. I had launched my very first training program in 2016, and it was becoming difficult to do all of it. So I sold content in the URL and I retained what brings in money. I retained the revenue. I started helping my dad in 2004. I continued to help him, and I helped my mom for 7 years, and she died this past August of 2022. Okay. So I always like to look up definitions of words that we use, and we're talking about impact today. And the definition of impact is to inspire change. So let's think about what that looks like in terms of helping and supporting family caregivers. So what's the change you want to see in the experience? That's the impact. Let's be a little more specific. So I was thinking through, how can we look at a change that can support a family caregiver? And I thought, well, let's get specific about what could be challenges that family caregivers face. So here are some. This is not an inclusive list, but it's a list to help you start to think, oh my gosh. For me, what was most difficult was nighttime. I wish I could think of a way to help family caregivers get a better night's sleep. Okay, so I'm going to open this up to you guys. When you look at this list, what's a word that just resonates with you about where you'd like to see change?
Finances and support.
Yes.
Yeah, that's huge for me.
We've been recording stories about what it's like to navigate the 17 caregiving systems, and the financial system is one of them. And I had an interview with Donna Thompson. It's on the YouTube channel that we have. I would really recommend watching it. Donna has cared for father, mother, stepfather, and currently cares for her son, who is now, I think, 34. We were talking about basic needs are unmet during a caregiving experience. And we focused mostly on money really being a difficult challenge during a caregiving experience. And before we started today, I wrote down the threat to our basic needs can be a caregiving situation. So you think about reduced hours at work, leaving the workplace at a time when you need money. So it is the worst kind of tension. You need more, you might have time for less as it relates to your work. So the finances are a huge stressor during a caregiving experience. And it's a challenge to figure out what's the solution for that. So for instance, states have looked at Medicaid waiver programs so that the family caregiver is the one who receives reimbursement, but that is a low reimbursement rate. So is that going to meet basic needs? It's not a given that there's enough within the system, even when the family caregiver is hired to provide care. And then thinking through within the family system, if you pool money, is there enough in the pool for everyone? Yeah, money. I also read this article earlier this week that talked about how research had said to us that happiness doesn't increase once we reach a certain financial threshold. When we start to make 75,000, our happiness level doesn't increase if we start to make more money. Now that turned out to be untrue. And I think we could all say that that does not make sense, right? Happiness and making more money equate more happiness. So there isn't necessarily a ceiling on how much happiness you have based on how much money you have. Money helps you be happy. And if you've been in a situation where you don't have enough money, you know what it's like to starve. That's a starvation system when you don't have enough money. It's very difficult to be happy when you're starving. Okay. So please let me know if I'm mispronouncing your name. So Gwebelin, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing. Please let me know. You had mentioned process, stress, routine, finances, future. I wonder if you feel comfortable unmuting yourself and pick one of those words to tell us what you see as a challenge that you'd like to resolve. And it's process, stress, routine, finances, future. And if you prefer, you don't have to unmute. You can always just tell me a little bit more in the chat room. In our caregiving experience, we have lots of processes. So we can think through. Oh, go ahead. Go for it.
My caregiver experience, I take care of an elderly, my uncle, who's going through early stages of dementia, as well as foster children. And the process sometimes, and the routine can get, jumbled sometimes. Sometimes you're used to one process, or even when foster children come into my care, they may not come with everything they need, and I may not have everything I need for them. And so it gets the process that I have to start with them. It's almost as if it's like a flip floppy kind of process. It could be stressful at times, that support, like Joseph said, does cover most of this, because if you have a smooth process starting out, if you have um, the smooth routine, the support, and all of those, even finances sometimes, then, you could do much more. I take what I have and I make the best of it. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's about that good night's sleep.
Of course, right? I mean, isn't life really hard when you haven't slept?
Yeah.
And it could be that, yeah, and it could be that you're having the best day. You think, wow, this is an amazing day. It's just a terrific day. Why, why does it feel so hard? If you haven't gotten a good night's sleep, it's just hard to have the energy to enjoy the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think about processes during caregiving are different depending on perhaps the day. It could be different depending on the caree. That was something else that someone said to me earlier this week, which is going to be so obvious to you guys, but it really struck a aha with me, which is we don't necessarily have enough caregiving experiences to master a caregiving experience. So the more you do it, the more you master it. But within a lifetime, we might have 3 or 4 different caregiving experiences, but each one is different. Even when I think about caring for my mom versus caring for my dad, those are different experiences. The diagnoses are different, and the relationships I have with each is different, and their perspective on life and then death is very different as well. So process is interesting because there can be a disruption to a process that's completely out of our control. The pandemic, we had processes in place. Overnight, everything changed. And all of a sudden, the process that worked is no longer available to us. And we have to think through what's a different process. There are other factors that can impact a process. For me, I had a brother who was really supportive, very helpful. Gosh, if I was having a bad day and sent him a text, you know, there would be a basket of wine and fruit at my doorstep the next day. He was that kind of person. And he died suddenly in August of 2021. So then my support process changed. So we do our best with our process, we do our best with our routine. And then there's something that happens that's completely out of our control that disrupts it. So when I think about how can we support a family caregiver with a process, it often includes managing a disruption to a process. The home health aide is a no-show. The carry has a decline. There's an unexpected hospitalization. I must have had a lot of fruits and vegetables this week because the other thing I thought of this week was self-care. So oftentimes people will tell us, you know, take care of yourself during caregiving, and they'll use the oxygen mask analogy, which makes me crazy because it's apples and oranges. When you're on an airplane and oxygen masks drop, there's enough oxygen masks for everyone. So I don't have to decide who gets an oxygen mask. There's enough for everyone. In a caregiving experience, we don't have enough oxygen masks for everyone, which is why it's so hard. It's not about that we want to put, we have the ability to put ours on first before we help another. It's that we don't have enough. And so we wonder, who's the priority that waits? Who's the priority that does without? And you can see why we think I'll just wait because there are other pressing needs. The other thing about self-care during caregiving, which is very different than outside of a caregiving experience, is that self-care requires energy. And if you don't have a lot of energy, no matter how great it sounds for someone to say to you, here's a gift card to get a massage. If you don't have energy, the last thing you want to do is make a phone call to schedule the massage or go online and make the online appointment and then leave the house to go get the massage. It requires energy, and energy can be a limited resource for us during our caregiving experience. And the other piece of it too is if we're in a situation where we feel starved, our basic needs are not met, we are exhausted chasing a basic need. And self-care is the luxury because we are chasing the basic need. And that's all we can see. That's all we can think about. That's all we're trying to create is that need fulfilled, that need met. Oh, you're welcome, Lisa. Yeah, I think I think unless you've been in that place where you just don't have enough, it's hard for people to understand what that truly is like. How exhausting it is to starve. And you could be starving spiritually, you could be starving for support, you could be starving because there's just not enough money, you could be starving because there's not enough resources, help, support. There's all kinds of reasons that you might be in this place of being absolutely depleted. And when you're chasing down a solution, you are exhausted. Okay. So I'd love to hear from another person. What's another experience that you'd like to change during caregiving? And you could use one of these words, or you could have an idea that's not one of these words. This is really just inspiration for us. I'll share one more, and that's perspective. Oftentimes people will try to have us pivot to a perspective where there's a silver lining. Or what's another one, which feels cliche, like we don't get more than we can handle. You know which cliche I'm trying to reference. I can't say it quite clearly, but it's this idea that we're strong enough. And that's why we're given all these challenges. So sometimes people try to shift our perspective to find that silver lining. And what I find helpful with perspective is if someone says to me instead, well, no wonder you're exhausted. This is really hard. And so I'd love to have someone with that perspective around, you're not making it hard. It is this hard. It's not because you're wrong. It's because the systems are so difficult. It's because the challenges are so significant. So sometimes I feel like the pressure is on us for us to find a silver lining perspective. And I wish instead that there was a perspective out in the world that said, wow, look how complicated, complex, sophisticated this experience is. And look at what these individuals do every day, 365 days a year. Every day can feel like a Monday during caregiving. There are no holidays in caregiving. It's hard to get the paid time off, right? There is no PTO. There's no bank of time we can use to get a break. I'm curious what you guys think about the word training. Oh, Lisa, what makes you think ugh about training?
It just feels like judgment on me as opposed to wanting to actually help me. Like, I may not know a lot of things, but I know my daughter and I know how to take care of my daughter in particular as an individual better than anybody. And for people to suggest that the way to relieve um, any distress I feel or any overwork I'm experiencing or anything like me training is pretty laughable. Um, I uh, I it seems like people are much more willing to put resources into this too than actually like making sure there is respite care and making sure that bulk of time that's needed with somebody is appropriately shared among people, and that I would have those chances to participate in things that don't involve my daughter or to take care of myself in those ways that people are always telling us to do, right? Self-care and I had a lot of periods where it just, I mean, I was with her all the time and there really weren't options for other people to take over. And that's what's needed, not training.
Right, not training for you.
No,
Yes, right.
no, not as the parent or family member. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's really interesting because the default is we need to train family caregivers. And I don't mean to say that I didn't require training. I did need to learn things totally. I appreciated learning. And there can be a lot of frustration around having a home health aide come into the house on a Tuesday and a different one on a Wednesday and a third one on a Thursday. And as the family caregiver, you are the trainer for this revolving door of help. And that gets to be exhausting because you'd rather do the training once and then have a reliable pool that can help and provide respite than continuously training new staff.
I wasn't even really thinking about that side of it, but yeah, that's another reason why it's UGG for me is like, why am I the one responsible to train everybody else? And I'm certainly not getting paid for those hours. I'm not allowed to be on schedule the same time any other caregiver is for the program that does pay me. Like, yeah. Why are people having such frequent rotation, first of all, and why would a family member be expected to be the one who's training? Yeah. Yeah.
There's actually an app, and I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember it, but I'll follow up with an email to our archive, and I'll include this as a resource where you actually create a series of training videos that then your backup and your home health aides, for instance, reference. And then you just update it when care needs change. And that way it's not you providing the training, you've created the training, but then your backup and your home health aides have access to the app to actually watch the training videos. Yeah, and the idea that training is not necessarily readily available too. And I think about the training that I wish I would have taken, of course, but I didn't, which would be like CPR. And then I think sometimes it would be helpful to know how to help my dad up off the floor after he fell. And it was the same with my mom. And it was just like I took a deep breath and then just, tried to figure it out until we couldn't. And then we called 911. I'm curious if you guys could create a program that's training for family caregivers. What's a class that you would incorporate in that training? Oh, setting boundaries. That's a good one, Lisa. Yep. Yep. And I think it would be nice if we looked at what's in our community that could become a hub for family caregivers that they could go to for training, for instance. So what's the opportunity at a local library for a training program on a Saturday morning? And it could be that it's around transfers, lifts, hands-on care, supplies to keep on hand. I wish sometimes that someone had given me a little more of a heads up about how thin skin gets as we age, and to keep really helpful wound care supplies on hand rather than running out at the last minute, but to have nonstick bandages, tons of antibiotic cream, those flexible wraps now that they have, which are fabulous. There's different colors for them. Those kinds of things to keep on hand would really be helpful for someone to say, hey, you know what? At a certain age, the thin skin is going to be a problem. Here's what you can keep on hand. Yeah, the legal issues, advanced directives, finding resources without being overwhelmed with options, right? I have been thinking about AI as it relates to information and referral, and I think AI is going to be helpful around that, Christy. This idea that we just say specifically, I just need a resource for this, and then AI says, here's the resource. I've had interns from U of I, University of Illinois, this semester, and we've spent some time the last couple weeks of our semester with them researching AI to see which AI offering they liked. So we tried Chat GPT and we tried Bard, and they used the same scenarios with each to see what happened. And one of the scenarios they used was, I'm caring for my grandmother who has bed sores. What supplies do I need? And they were able to get the information. Yeah, there is. Yeah. So Cheryl's asking about something that we talk about when we do our family emergency planning. And you guys are welcome to join us for that. That happens on the fourth Friday of every month at 1 p.m. Eastern time. There's a harness that you can wear. It's called Helping Handles. I'll include that in the follow-up email with the training app and with the fall harness. It's just a very simple, we call it a harness, but when you look at it, you say, oh, it's really a harness, but has plastic handles. I put it on, and then when I'm helping someone up, they grab the plastic parts of the harness, and then I help them up. I used to do a national caregiving conference, and they were they were part of a product competition we held. They won, and they did a demonstration of what it's like to help someone up. And I was the caree. So I was on stage on the ground, and the developer of the product picked me up with his helping handles. They're very inexpensive. I think they're 40, $50. They come in different sizes. So I have different sizes. My niece used to help my parents, and so she's a very petite, small person. So I got a small for her so she could still put the harness on and still help. Okay. All right. So just some ideas about what you could think about in terms of what you'd like to change in a family caregiving experience. And it's helpful to get specific, because if we think, oh my gosh, I have to change everything, it's paralyzing to think of what you need to change. So if you can get specific about one thing you'd like to change, then it can help you figure out what's that change. And again, it could be this question that we started our conversation with, which is, how do I get a better night's sleep? So if you could figure out what's the solution, and test some things yourself, try different things that you think, okay, this is what I'm going to do before bed this night, this night, this night, and then see what works. Test it out. Okay. So then let's think about what's the form the solution takes. Really, we're talking about what's the solution that you could offer to help family caregivers. So then how does it become something in the world? And again, just some ideas. This is not an inclusive list, but some things for you to think about. So could it be a book or a class or coaching services? Could it be a podcast? Could it be a program, product, a service? Could it be a campaign that you launch on social media? Perhaps it's content on a website or workshops. If you do a class, maybe it's a class on how to use AI to find information and referrals to resources during a caregiving experience, and test out the different options with AI and see which one works best for which situations. That would be really helpful. I think we oftentimes feel intimidated by these new releases of technology and how to use it and what it's going to do for us. And if you actually do the testing for a family caregiver, that will be helpful. Something else to think about when you are creating something helpful for family caregivers, we're already stressed, so we're looking for the simple solution. Okay, so what sticks out to you on this list?
Um, for me, it would be like creating workshops, because that can include, many of the lists there, like helping about finding products, helping about finding services, or how to navigate social media to find resources, the same of websites. We don't realize that not everybody has the capacity to navigate online with a computer or even their phone. We have that experience. We do support, my wife and I, for patients and caregivers in South America, and not everybody has access to a computer, or usually they navigate websites on a phone, which is limited. So how to teach them how to do things like that, the workshops about that, how to find the right resources is important.
I love that. And I love that you got specific about who you want to help,
Mhm.
which you can really think about. So for instance, Jesus is specific about a locale. So you could be specific around a family caregiver of a certain relationship, those who are caring for their dads, for instance, or adult daughters who are working and caring for their dad. So it could be relationship, but it also could be specific to a diagnosis, helping those who care for a daughter, for instance, thinking through, you're the example of that experience, what would help you that you could offer to someone in a similar situation. You can be very creative in terms of how you define who you're going to help. So Jesus, you could even be more specific than that. So you want to help men in South America who are caring for their spouses. Okay, so Lisa's got a podcast, which is awesome. And so she wants to do more writing and be more active and grow engagement on social media. Yep. And something with social media, I think sometimes we feel like we have to be on every platform. And the truth is, you want to be on the platform that you like. So which one do you like to use? That's the platform to start off on. And then you could add one more if you wanted, but it's where you like to be. It's just like with support groups, oftentimes during our facilitator training, people will say to me, when do I host this support group? When are family caregivers going to attend? And honestly, it's when you have availability. So the day and time that works for you is when you want to schedule your support group meeting. Because if it doesn't work for you, it's not going to work for anyone. You can always adjust it later, but start with what works for you and then make the adjustment. I'm curious which social media platforms you guys use. You're welcome to share in the chat room. Something that I didn't mention, I guess you could say it falls under social media, but it also could be that you create videos on YouTube and your videos are a condensed workshop, so to speak. Maybe you have a longer workshop that you offer at your local library. Your videos take one piece of the workshop, and then you create a series of 7 videos on YouTube. Oh, YouTube. Oh, okay. Yeah. So Facebook, YouTube. Yeah, Facebook. Yeah. Something else that's a little interesting about social media, there really is starting to turn from one place where everybody goes to a more niche place where you go. So you might belong to a couple different smaller social networks that reflect your career. So connecting with others in a career that you enjoy a conversation about, connecting with family caregivers, and then maybe connecting with others in your neighborhood. So rather than one big social network, it's a few that are more specialized. I think that's kind of interesting to watch that. Okay, so Lisa is really getting specific about who she wants to serve. So you can get as specific as you want. And the more specific you get about who you want to serve, the easier it is for you to connect with people who you want to serve. So I often think about this as it relates to, for instance, a networking event. Let's say you're out, you go to a networking event in your community and someone says, "What do you do?" And you say, "Well, I help family caregivers." Like, "Oh, okay, good for you." If you get really specific, I help spouses in South America who are in a caregiving situation by providing them support that they can't access on technology or something like that. I mean, how compelling is that? Tell me more about how you do that. How do you connect with them? What kind of services do you offer? So the more specific you can get, the more I think you're going to connect with people who are interested in learning more, and the more they can think of someone they know. Oh my gosh, I know someone in that situation. I'd love to connect you. How can I make the introduction? So narrow. So here's what's interesting. It's ironic. Narrowing doesn't limit. Because I think sometimes people feel like I have to be really broad, but narrowing is where the opportunity is. And again, it's because it helps you connect with who you want to connect with. And you could have 2 or 3 specific offerings, for instance. So maybe you have one group of clients or family caregivers that you reach, and you're really specific about how you define that. And then you have a second, and you're really specific about how you define that. And then a third, and you're really specific about how you define that. And you might talk about one based on your audience or the networking meeting or where you are. Okay. You could have an idea for a product or a service or content, and it could take several forms. For instance, maybe it starts as a book, but then it becomes a podcast. Maybe you interview people who have an experience that you talked about in the book. And then maybe it becomes a workshop, because maybe in your book you've spelled out a process that can help everyone get a better night's sleep. And then in the workshop, you lead a conversation about how to get a better night's sleep. So you can see how one becomes many. Okay. What questions might you have before we move in? I'm just going to move on to talk a little bit about the training programs that we have. But if you have other questions or insights about anything we just talked about, I'd be happy to take a minute to address them. Yeah, we'll talk about that when we get to the training programs. Jesus, we'll talk about certifications. Yep, absolutely. Okay, everybody good to move on? Okay. So here are the different training programs. And if you're thinking about doing something on social media, really taking a challenge and talking about it to create greater awareness, the advocate training is a great place to start. It's $30. It's a 1-hour archive training that you watch, and it helps you with messaging and purpose. So you can take that at any time. And it really helps you get focused on what's the messaging I want to put out on social media. It also helps you with what's the introduction to use when you're out networking, talking about the change that you want to make in your community or with family caregivers. If you're interested in creating support groups as a solution, we have training for caregiving support groups and grief support groups. And then I just launched this one last month. And it's a guide. And you deliver a workshop that I first created in 1999 that I've updated and revised and tweaked and made relevant today. And what you do is you teach family caregivers how to navigate the 6 caregiving stages and the 17 caregiving systems. So when we talk about training, I think, wow, do we need to figure this out, right? All of a sudden we're thrown in and no one explains to us what we're thrown into. And no one kind of gives us a heads up that, oh my gosh, this system navigation is going to be exhausting. Here's what you can do to help manage that. I had mentioned earlier that we're recording stories of what it's like to navigate the 17 systems. If you're interested, we'd love to schedule time with you. We just ask you 5 different questions and you share a couple stories about what it's like. So the guide has a presentation that we've already developed that you deliver in your community. And you define community. It could be your neighborhood, it could be online. You can use variations of it so that it's just a 1-hour overview, or if 2 3-hour workshops, or 3 2-hour workshops, or 6 1-hour workshops. And it's an interactive workshop. So we developed it so that when you're sharing with family caregivers, they're actually engaged in exercises about the experience. Each of these programs do have certification requirements. They all require an exam. The guide also requires that you do a 30-minute workshop to practice delivering this so that when you're certified, you actually go out and deliver it. Okay, so then I just thought of this one this morning. And I had told myself I wasn't going to do any more, that I had figured it out. I wasn't going to add any more. And then I did a workshop with financial planners earlier this week. And we talked about how you can create plans that can solve some caregiving challenges. We went through this whole workshop, and at the end, someone said, okay, I get that we're going to have plans, but then what do you do about family disputes? I thought, oh my gosh, will you plan for how to manage family disputes? Because we know family disputes happen. And I've been managing my own personal family disputes for decades. And I finally thought, oh my gosh, I realize why I have had so many disputes in my life. Because I can teach people how to manage. So the conflict strategist is someone who learns how to help the family plan to manage disputes and then put a plan in place when a dispute arises. Now, I think of this as the step before mediation. In addition, conflicts arise all the time during a caregiving experience. And we're not going to always bring in a mediator for all these conflicts. But if we had a conflict a strategist that could help us, oh my gosh. So I have an older sister, and I hate to diagnose her, but I'm just going to diagnose her. So she is a malignant narcissist, very set on destructive, likes to destroy relationships. So we've been managing her for 25 years or so. So whenever anything would happen with my parents, my sister, my other siblings and I would always talk about, well, what do we do about? So we always planned, we always had a strategy to manage her. We weren't going to reach out to a mediator. We weren't going to invite her to join us in therapy. We just were going to figure out what's our strategy, knowing who she is. So that's what a conflict strategist can do. And the specialist is a virtual assistant for family caregivers. And AI is going to be part of this training as well. How can you use AI as a virtual assistant to help family caregivers save time? And I think about the specialist as someone who is in the pragmatic stage of caregiving, meaning that you are used to how difficult it is. And it's a small business you start during your caregiving experience to bring in a little extra money. And then our coaching programs include a comfort care family coach. That starts with palliative care. When a caree starts palliative care, a comfort care family coach starts to support that family caregiver. It is, the idea is taken from death doulas. I think about end of life is really hard to bring in someone new, which is why we have to start sooner. And that's the comfort care family coach. And then our certified caregiving consultant, that was actually the first training program I launched, is the caregiving coach throughout the 6 stages. For these programs, we have closed enrollment. Enrollment is only the first 7 days of every month. And then after you become a consultant, you can become an educator. You can train the guides, and you can deliver different workshops, including resolving caregiving conflicts. Okay. I wanted to mention something else too. Any questions about any of those programs? You can all schedule time with me. Happy to have one-on-ones with you if you have any interest in any of these. A lot of the programs are, especially the coaching programs, help you if you are launching products and services. The coaching programs are all around revenue generating. The other programs a little bit in specific. The coaching programs are really about starting a business. Okay, and then I just wanted to mention that we have a call out for our caring awards. So if you know someone, or if you are a caring leader, if you already have a caregiving program, or if you have a grief support program, I'd love for you to think about submitting a nomination. And it's all on the website, careyearsacademy.com. And the nominations close on May 26th. So if you're a caring leader or you know someone, I'd love for you to submit a nomination. And I define a caring leader in the way that you define it, someone that you think really leads the way and is caring about doing it. Okay, so I've got a coupon code for you. If you're interested in doing the advocate, facilitator, specialist, or guide programs, you can save 15%. And the coupon code is May, just the month of May. Okay, and that's what I had for you today. So feel free to reach out. Happy to schedule time. I schedule one-on-one calls with people all the time to talk out training programs. What's the fit? What's the budget? What's the right fit for the right budget? So feel free to reach out if that's helpful for you. This was a lot of fun to have this with you guys today. I always appreciate the opportunity to talk out these thoughts, especially because you give me immediate feedback, so it helps me to know if what I'm saying is actually relevant. So that's always helpful for me. Okay, what other questions might you have before we close for today?
No, just want to thank you. for
Oh,
all
you're
the
welcome.
information
You're welcome.
And everybody's comments. I mean, you learn something new all the time and you're like gathering all the information to make decisions. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, and I like to have these conversations because it's so helpful for you to think about the wisdom that you can turn into the impact that you make. Okay, I think we're good. Everybody feel complete? Okay, then we're going to close for today. I'll send a follow-up email tomorrow. I'll include those 2 resources I mentioned, and I'll include a link to the archive too. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for all you do. Thanks for being here. Have a good rest of today.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
thanks everybody. Bye-bye.